Hi guys, Adam here. So recently we created a jump height monitoring dashboard. I'm not going to go too much into this. You can watch the last video on this. I had a question from one of my friends named Keith, and he said, "Well, can I do this with sprint times?" So, all right, well, yeah, you can. And so now I'm going to show you how, but I'm going to kind of go a little bit further and just maybe show a way to do it with a bunch of different metrics, and you can pick which one you're going to use. So all I've done here is, if you remember our spreadsheet last time, is we had some dates with some athletes and their vertical jump heights. And then we created a grade, which is essentially a percentage of this jump height compared to their maximum jump height that they've achieved in the data set. So if we look at, I'm just going to look at this guy Alpha here, and we're going to notice that his highest jump height is a 100%. His second highest is below 100%, and then as you kind of decrease in jump height, that percentage decreases. And what we essentially want to do is we want this same grade to apply to trap bar deadlifts and 10-meter sprint times. However, and this is another wrench thrown into it, it's a little bit more practical probably, and it's more difficult to conquer, is that these tests were done on different days also. So we're going to figure out how to accommodate for that too. Now, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create another column, two more actually, for the grades of the other different tests. So I'm just going to right click and create a couple, and maybe I name these differently now that we're expanding this. I'll call this VJ grade. The next one will be 10M sprint grade, and the last one will be TBDL grade. And the numbers that I have for these are just randomly generated numbers between a couple values that I thought might be relevant or might be indicative of what these numbers might be. But in any case, what we can do, the TBDL grade is easy because the trap bar deadlift is higher is better, just like the vertical jump. So what we can do, and we did this in the last video, so if you haven't seen it, then you can do that and get this formula. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste it in the TBDL grade. And I already have the formula working right. The only thing that I have to do is I have to change. Well, let's go over what we're saying first. What we're saying is we want the average of the vertical jump when the athlete is equal to the athlete in this row, and when the date is equal to the date in this row. That's the first thing that we're saying right here. And all that's getting is this value, because there's only one value on this date for this athlete. And we're dividing that by the maximum vertical jump when if this athlete is equal to the athlete in this row. So essentially what we're doing is we're taking this value on this date and dividing it by the maximum value for that athlete of all time, or their presence in this data set. And all we have to do is we want to do the same thing with trap bar deadlift, so we're going to change this to TBDL. And notice it's kind of highlighted there. And I'll do the same thing over here, because instead of the vertical jump, we want the TBDL. And I'll click enter. That's fine. There are no trap bar deadlifts here, so we don't expect to see anything there. And as we scroll down, once we start getting to the trap bar deadlifts, we'll start seeing these values appear, and that's what we want. Now, the 10-meter sprint is a little bit more tricky, and it's just math, but it's a little bit more tricky to deal with, or it's different than this. And I guess what we can do is it's easiest to copy this formula and paste it here to start. But we need to go about this in a different way. There are two things that we need to change. The first is the order of these two things. And the second is, instead of getting the maximum, we want the minimum. So what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to change these. Oh, there's actually one other thing we have to do, but I'll talk about that in a second. We're going to change this to 10-meter sprint, and we're going to change this to 10-meter sprint, just like we did before for the trap bar deadlift. I'll click enter. And now what we're going to do, and let's filter down to an athlete, because that'll make it just easier to see. And I hope not. I may have to mess around with the calculation now. But notice when we do this, his highest sprint time is 100%, and then the lower the sprint time goes, the lower the percentage of his maximum sprint time. That's pretty much the opposite of what we want, because the lowest sprint time is actually the best. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this max formula that we have, the max if, and remember, make sure you know how to do this because later on we use max ifs, the one that the newer versions of Excel come with, and I'm going to use that throughout this tutorial. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to remove it, and I'm going to remove the division sign. And before the average ifs happens, I'm going to put the division sign and go to the left of it and paste the max if. I'm going to click enter. And yeah, this doesn't look right, and it's not. But we're just going step by step. So now what you should have is you should have the max and the if stuff that you had before divided by the average ifs. Now the next thing that we're going to do is we cannot, when we're doing this, we cannot consider the 10-meter sprint times that are blank. So right here, after this comma, I'm going to do another one, go to the left of it, and I'm going to add another if statement. So not only when the athlete is equal to the athlete in this row, we also want if the 10M sprint, I did open square bracket, 10M sprint is not equal to blank. And then the last thing we're going to have to do is put parentheses around here. And it's still not going to be right. It's going to be the exact same thing that we had before. But the last thing that we're going to do with this formula is we're going to change this max to min. So instead of max, M-I-N, min, and I'll click enter. And now what we should see is the minimum sprint time is 1 or 100%. And as we get further away from that sprint time in the positive direction, this number should decrease. I hope that makes sense. And now we have all of our variables ready to use. So now essentially what we have is percentage grades for each of these variables. And if we want to display this stuff, well, that's tough because we designed this for vertical jump height. And maybe I remove this guy now because it's not just about jump height. Maybe I change this to performance monitoring dash. I'll call it physical performance monitoring dashboard. Long name, but that's fine. So we're going to run into a couple things here. Number one is the dates are different and the tests of those dates are different. So if I am clicking through dates or if I want to select a date, hopefully this date is filtered down to whatever test I'm looking at. And that's a whole nother animal. We need to be able to pick the test that we look at. And then even in here, this graph, which is now changed because we have more dates, needs to be streamlined into the metric that we're looking at. And I want to reiterate that that the way that we're doing this is not ideal, okay? And that originally when we did this, this was going to be a reference sheet, and then for whatever reason, we decided to create this dashboard. Ideally, your references are outside of this sheet, but we're just going to keep on working in this sheet for now. If you're doing this on your own, I would advise maybe having this graph generated in another sheet and have this drop-down list that we're about to create in another sheet also. But for now, we're just going to keep it here. And I don't even know where I want to put this list. Maybe I'll just do it right here in X. I'm going to call this drop-down list. Or I'll call this performance list. Maybe make it bold. And then eventually I'm also going to have a date list. So maybe 2 over in Z, I'll have a date list. But don't have to worry about that right now. My performance list, I pretty much have 3 tests, right? I got VJ and I got 10M. That's sprinting. And then I have, what do I have? BDL, trap bar deadlift. Those are my performance items. And what we're going to do now is we're just going to create a list. And I'm not going to do a dynamically updating list or anything like that. I have a bunch of videos on how to do that. You can find that in a lot of places. So what I'm going to do is right here, this is going to be my selector. Whatever I pick here, that should be the information that shows up. That's what I'm deciding. Maybe I'll make it that same type of blue color and white. I don't know. All right, so I'm going to go to data and go to data validation, and I'm going to say list. And now I'm going to select the items in my list that I want to pick from. And those are over here. I'm going to select these 3 things. I'll click OK. And now, if I go over here, there's going to be a drop-down icon that shows up, and I should be able to pick from these 3 things. That's not going to do anything. It's going to change what shows up in this box. Like now it says 10M, now it says TBDL. It doesn't change anything else. But now we have a drop-down list that we could theoretically use to pick the metric that we want to look at. Actually, maybe I'll make this. No, I'll keep the color the same for now. Okay, so now let's work on these values here. So we're going to write an if statement, and it's going to layer on top of this average if statement. It sounds a little bit complex, but it's actually not. We've already done most of it. It's mostly a copy and paste job. So the way that we're going to start this, and I like to do this, I'm going to hold down Alt and click Enter a lot to segregate lines. I don't know how you do it in your program or if you can, but I like it for organizational purposes. So I'm going to hold down Alt and click Enter just to kind of segregate things out. And I'm going to say if, in parentheses, if this, whatever this is, and I'm going to lock it in with dollar signs because I don't want it to move. If whatever's in this cell in my dropdown equals first thing in my list, which is VJ, and this needs to stay that way, or else I'll pull the wrong data for the wrong thing in the drop-down list. I'm going to lock that in, comma. So what I'm saying now is if this in my drop-down list equals this value here, the first thing in my list, then I want the average vertical jump for the athlete on this date here. And I'm going to remove this at the end. And that's the first part of it. Okay, now that we have this done, this is done. Take a good look at it and just make sure that it looks this way. I'm going to copy this. I'm going to hold down Alt, Enter, and I'm going to paste it in here. So we know what's happening if this is equal to the first thing on our list. We're going to get the vertical jump values. Now, if C5, the same thing, is equal to X11, if we go over here and look at X11, it's 10M. So now if that's equal to X11, instead of getting the vertical jump values in our table, we want to get the 10-meter sprint values in our table. And now I'm going to hold down Alt and click Enter again and paste it in again. And now, if this isn't equal to VJ or 10M, it's going to be equal to X12, and I'm going to change this to X12. It's going to be equal to TBDL. So if we select TBDL in our list, then we want to, or the third thing in our list, which is TBDL, and we need to make sure that order stays the same, then I want the TBDL values. And if none of these things are true, I wanted to say, quote, no data, and then close off the parentheses. That's my if error statement. So if but right now it says value of false because I need to add more parentheses here. So I'm going to add parentheses until this last one becomes black. It looks like it's purple. Now it looks like it's red. Now it looks like it's black. Okay, so now if I click in here, this is my value. If there's an error, I want to say no data. Now I'm going to click enter. Nothing changes because we have vertical jump selected. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to copy this. I'm going to highlight all my cells here. And I'm going to paste it. So Control V. Notice nothing changes. It's all the same. But let's see what happens if I change this to the second thing in my list, or 10M. Oh, well, that's a problem. No data. There's an error there. Now, why might that be? Well, one of the reasons why that is, or the reason why that is because there was no 10-meter sprint data collected on this date. That's something we're going to deal with in a second. But if I change this date to a day that had 10-meter sprint data, which let me just check. It looks like it was 6-5. There was data. If I change this to a 5, well, we didn't do anything with our grades, but our sprint data is there. Okay, I hope that makes sense. So let's keep going. And let's do the exact same thing that we did here with the grades. So it's literally the exact same thing. And we could actually, to make this even easier on ourselves, we can copy this and paste this in here. And now that we have that in there, instead of VJ, instead of getting the values for VJ, if this is the first thing in our list, we can get the VJ grade and then change the 10-meter sprint to the 10-meter sprint grade. And same thing, the TBDL to the TBDL grade. And I'm going to click enter. Now I'm going to copy this. I'm going to paste it all the way down here. Now, I'm not sure how it's formatted, but we'll see in a second. If I go to 6-5, now we have our 10-meter sprint values and our grades. And maybe I select all these cells again and I make them a percentage. And one of the limitations of this, I guess, if you will, is that there's no really good way to format this because our well, I guess maybe we do 2 decimals, but it's just going to look kind of ugly with things that, like, for example, a trap bar deadlift. It'll have, I mean, there's no data because, what was it, 6-4, 5-4, fine, because they're whole numbers. But you can kind of choose the way that you want to format it. I don't know a way to have it dynamically change. But let's go back to our vertical jump stuff, and let's go to a date that has vertical jump stuff. We're starting to see something here, and that's great. But let's deal with this date situation because there's no way that I'm going to know which dates align with each of these categories unless I have an automated way of doing that. And there are a couple ways to do this, but I have a way that I like better just for consistency's sake. But you can do named ranges and other things if you know how to use those. But essentially what we're doing is we're going to create a date list here. And the way that we're going to do that is very similar to what we did here, where we have 3 different if statements that coincide with what's selected here. We're going to do the same thing with dates so that the dates only correspond to the dates that are relevant based on what we selected. So the way that we're going to do that is on our date list here, we're going to go, maybe let's just create the formula first that would get us a unique list of dates in general, and then we can kind of go from there. So we go equals index, open parentheses. Now what do we want to index? Table 1, we want to get the date, and that's the first step. So as long as you have that typed in there, you should be all set for right now. And then we're going to go match. We go comma match, open parenthesis, 0, comma, count if, open parenthesis. And now pay attention here. We're going to click on the cell above the one that we have it in, which is our date list right here. And the cell Z9 should pop up if it's in the exact same place that mine is. Do colon to Z9. But with one of these, the first one actually, I'm going to do a dollar. I hate how it does that. Z9 colon Z9. So it's saying Z9 to Z9, but the first one I'm going to lock in. So do a dollar sign before the Z, a dollar sign before the 9. We'll look at that for a second. And then I'm going to do a comma and table 1, open square bracket, date, close the square bracket. I'm going to do a parentheses, I don't know how many there are, but then eventually I'm going to do comma 0 and then parentheses. And what we want to do is we want to click on the 0. So that's not where I want it to be. I want the 0 to be here. No, yep. I want, when you click on the 0 or in this area, it should be the match type. And I'm going to close that off so that a block parentheses in the end. I'm going to hold down Control and Shift and click Enter. And when I do that, you'll see that there are squiggly brackets on either side of the formula. And if I drag this list down, I should get a unique list of all my dates. And then if I keep on going, I'll get errors. One way to clear that up is using if error. We'll do that at the end. But this isn't exactly what we want. If I did a drop-down list of this, I would have a drop-down list of all my dates, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the test that I want was performed on that date. So again, like I said before, we're going to do something very similar to what we did here. It's almost the same, but using that index formula. So let's do that. I'm going to go here, and before the index formula starts, I'm going to say if, open parenthesis, I'm going to click on our drop down here, if C5, and let's lock that in. So if what I pick from my drop down list equals this right here, X10, the first thing in my list, comma. So if that's true, we want to index, and we want this list of dates. But there's one other thing that we need to consider now. Because even if that's true, we'll still get the whole list of dates. Before this count if area, we're going to go if, open parenthesis, table 1, open square bracket, VJ, close a square bracket. So now what we're saying is not only, we want, so this has to be equal to what we select on our drop down, but also whatever is in table VJ or is in the column VJ cannot be equal to blank, comma, and then we'll go through with this process. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to figure out where this is. So I need a parenthesis here, and I think I need another one at the end here. And now I'm going to hold down Control, Shift, and Enter. I'm going to drag this down, and I should see errors. Now, what I just did was I told Excel, and take a look at the formula, I said pretty much, give me all the stuff with vertical jumps if whatever this is here is what shows up in my dropdown. So now these are all my dates with vertical jumps. We're not done. We're almost done, though. We can copy this and just do it over again a couple times. Because now we need to consider the 10-meter sprints and the trap bar deadlifts. So I'm going to copy this whole thing. And actually, I'll remove a parenthesis first because that'll come towards the end. I'll copy this whole thing, do a comma. Now we're saying, so if C5 is not, or what we pick in our dropdown is not equal to this, now what do we want to do? Well, I'm going to click down Alt, Enter, to create a new line. You don't have to do that, but it's good for organizational purposes. I'm going to paste this in. I'm going to change X10 to X11. Well, if C5 is not equal to X10, then what happens if it's equal to X11? Well, we don't want the vertical jump not equal to blank anymore. We want the 10-meter sprint not equal to the blank, and the rest of the stuff stays true. And I'll do a comma again, Alt, Enter, paste this in. Now, if it's not equal to X11, now if it's equal to X12, instead of getting the VJ here, we want the TBDL not equal to blank. And now what I can do at the end of all of this, now that we have our three conditions kind of met, I can keep on creating parentheses until a black one shows up. But before this, and I guess I'll do the if error at the end, but I'll just show you. If I hold down Control, Shift, and Enter, and I drag this down, we have our list of vertical jump dates. And now why aren't the other dates showing up? Well, because vertical jump is selected here, and that's what we wanted. Now if I select something else, 10M, and I go over here, the dates changed by 1. They're 3, 5, 4, 5, 5, 5, 6, 5. And TBDL should be 3, 4, 4, 4, 5, 4, 6, 4. Let's test that right now. So if I change this to TBDL and go over here, now we have the 4th. So this is working right. In the end of this whole thing, before the first if statement, I'm going to say if error, if there's an error with anything going on here, comma, let's make it blank, close the parenthesis, and I'm going to hold down Control, Shift, and Enter again. And then I'm going to notice the squiggly brackets on either side. I did it right. And I'm going to drag this down again, just because I hate looking at errors. And now the errors are gone. Not that it really matters, but but you can kind of ignore blanks and drop down lists and stuff like that. Now, final step of this, and again, I'm not going to create a dynamic list, but I'm going to click on this date here, and I'm going to go to data validation, just like we did for our drop down here, and I want a list. It's asking me where I want to get the list from. I'll click on this, go over here, and we only have 4 dates, and I'm going to select these dates, Z10 to Z13, and they're highlighted there. I'm going to click OK. Now that I have trap bar deadlift selected, this date doesn't apply to trap bars. That's why we're not getting data. But now if I go in here, only the dates that apply to trap bar deadlift will. And if I click on this, we should get our data. We haven't dealt with the graph yet. And similarly here, and etc. Right? We can keep on going there. And then if I pick something else, notice these are the 4th, 6/4, 2020. I select 10 meter or 10M. If I go to my drop-down list, the 4th isn't there anymore because we didn't have sprints, but only everything where we present or where we had sprints shows up. All right, so we're like 50% there because we've got to deal with the graph and stuff. But now at least we have something dynamic that is organized and streamlined in a way that we want it. We can look at various metrics depending on what we have in this format. Finishing the graph won't be too tough. So you'll notice we're on 10M and nothing's showing up. The graph is still here. There's just no data that we've organized for it. And we still want the colors to show up the way that we organized it before based on our grade or the percentage. So I'm going to select VJ just so that we can, and select a date, so that we can see the stuff, right? Notice now there's data here. And again, this stuff should kind of be in a separate sheet if you want it to be nice and well organized, but I'm lazy and I didn't really anticipate this stuff happening. But anyways, so we're going to literally do the exact same thing that we just did twice now. We're just going to add in an if statement and organize this in a way where it takes the grade that we want it to take based on what we select. And we've already done that. We've done that. Where did we do that? We did that here. We did that here. And we did that over here. It's the same thing over and over again, but we have to do it. So let's go over this again. What are we saying to do right now? So the reason, first of all, let's backtrack. Why are these categories here? The categories are here for the chart because we want you can't conditionally format a chart for based on colors. You need to organize it in this type of way so that this column gets one color, this column gets another color, this column gets another color, etc. So we want that to hold true with all of our metrics. Well, I do. So I'm going to do Alt-Enter here, just to kind of get out of here for a second, or to organize it. I'm going to remove, and I'm actually going to remove this whole if error thing for now. Why not? Let's just remove it all and do equals up here so that there's a formula going on. Now I'm going to say if equals if open parenthesis. It's going to be the exact same thing that we've already done. We probably could, there's a more efficient way to do this, I'm sure, but it's good practice anyways. If C5, and let's lock that in, $sign for the C, $sign for the 5, equals, over here, equals this, X10, $sign, lock it in, comma. If that's true, then we want the average, we want the vertical jump grade for the athlete that we pick, that's what we're saying here, and for the date that's selected. And we're pretty much saying at the end if the grade is equal to 1, or if it's a 100%, if it's a PR. And then these different columns vary between these percentages that we set up last time that we can dynamically control, which will dynamically control the colors that we see on the graph here. But that's in the previous video, so you can go over that if you want. Comma. So if that's true, if this is true, then we want the vertical jump stuff. That's essentially what we're saying. And I'm going to do Alt-Enter like I usually do. I'm going to copy all this stuff that we already have. Man, I didn't mean to do that. I cut it, but Alt-Enter and paste it. And now we're just going to say, well, if the thing on our dropdown, which is C5, is equal to X11, and you guys might already know this now because We've done this a bunch of times. I'm just going to go over here one more time. Then we want this, or the whatever the 10 meter stuff is. So instead of the VJ grade, we want the 10 meter sprint grade that we created in our original table. And same thing here. We want to know if the 10 meter sprint grade is a 1, not the VJ grade. Do Alt Enter, paste this again. I'm going to change X10 to X12 and change this VJ grade to the TBDL grade. And I'm going to do the same thing here, TBDL grade. And now I'm going to add the if error on again. So if there's an error, if there's an error with all this stuff or any of this stuff, comma, then let's make it blank, I think we did. Close a parenthesis, but we have to add some more parentheses in here first. So that parenthesis looks greenish, and I'm going to add another one, add another one, add another one, and now it's black. Click Enter. Now we have our formula. That's great. Now what I'm going to do, notice everything's kind of locked in except for A6, and this is looking at the athlete, and the 6 is not locked in. So if we drag this formula down, it'll apply to each athlete individually, which is what we want. But what we need to do now is we need to apply this, the PR, the 100%, we need to apply it for the good, okay, and bad categories. And this could be somewhat cumbersome. Let's just do it quickly. You can do find replace to do it faster, but I'm going to copy this, paste it here. And what we have to do is we have to add some other stuff, right? If we look at what we have here is now the PR is just one value. So we pretty much say that we want the value if the grade is equal to whatever this is. But now we need to say we want the value if the grade is greater than this and less than this, or greater than or equal to and less than or equal to. So let's go here. Remember, we're on our good cell now. Now, instead of the VJ grade being equal to this, we're going to go quote greater than or equal to, end quote, and sign. Greater than or equal to not U5, but not U6, but V6 right here, comma, and table 1, open square bracket grade, comma, is less than, quote, less than equal to, end quote, ampersand, this, U6. So now we're saying $sign before the U, $sign before the 6. Now what we're saying is we want the grade to show up here if it's, oops, table 1 grade, that's not a real thing. Or I want table 1 VJ grade. My apologies. So we want the grade to show up if it's between these two numbers, which we can manipulate. And now instead of doing this a bunch of times, I'm going to copy from the comma of C3 onwards, because it's a little bit faster to do it this way. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to replace this with it. And I'm going to change VJ grade to 10M sprint grade. And I'm going to change VJ grade to 10M sprint grade. And I'm going to do the same thing here for the comma and beyond. I'm going to remove it, and I'm going to paste in what I had before, which is the VJ grade. Change the VJ grade to be the TBDL grade. And here, change the VJ grade to be the TBDL grade. Take a look at this. Screenshot it if you need to. Do whatever you need to do. I'm going to click Enter. And now I'm going to copy this and paste it to the OK, and then paste it to the bad. Paste it to the OK, paste it to the bad. And for the OK, if we want to do this quickly, we can do a find replace. I'd rather do that than do it manually, but you could, maybe I'll do the bad with a find replace. But just so you can see how you do this manually is, now when we're in the OK column, we want to be between the OK numbers. So instead of V6, Instead of the grade being greater than or equal to V6, we want it greater than or equal to V7. And instead of it being less than or equal to U6, we want it less than or equal to U7. So I'm just going to change this 6 to a 7, and you'll see it highlighted here. Now I'm going to change this 6 to a 7, change this 6 to a 7, and this is one of the, and change this 6 to a 7. Notice how there are multiple things highlighted. Change this 6 to a 7, change this 6 to a 7. When you're complete, when you're done with it, you should only see these two cells highlighted if your computer allows you to see the highlights. And then you know, okay, these are the cells that I'm looking at. I'm not, if I change this to 6, that would be a sign that, okay, something in this formula is looking at the wrong cell because I don't want that cell included. And I'm going to click enter. And I'm going to go to the bad, and I'm just going to do it manually again just because we did it and it's good. So we want these two cells to be these two cells. So instead of V6, we want it to be V8. Instead of U6, we want it to be U8. So 8 and 8. I'm just going to go V6 to 8 and 8. And finally, 8 and 8. And now we just have these two cells. And I click OK. Now the last step, but it's very important, is we're going to highlight these 4 cells because we only have them applied to this person right now, to one row, alpha. And we need to drag this down, drag it down to the last guy on our list, which is Zulu, row 31. So I'm going to click here after I have them all highlighted with this black crosshairs and drag it down to cell 31, or where Zulu is, and release it. Nothing changed. That's because we're on the vertical jump, and this data was based on the vertical jump. But now, I hope this works, or it's going to be really embarrassing. If I click on 10-meter sprint, we're going to get no data because that's just the delay in our select date thing. So once we select the metric that we want, the dates will change to reflect the dates available for that metric. So there's going to be a temporary period of no data. If we select a date that is now all these dates have data, notice 4-6 is not one of those dates. If I select 4-5, now we have the data and the chart, and it all works the way that we want it to. And what this means is for November, who is a person's name, not the month, he had a sprint time of 1.78 on this date. And that sprint time was 77.5% of his best, which is kind of, whereas Quebec, he got a sprint time of 1.30, and that was his PR. That was his best sprint time that he's ever gotten on this date. And if we switch the date, yeah, other guys PR'd on this date, other guys did not, and that's just kind of the way that she goes. And if I want to change this to TBDL, again, there's going to be a temporary period of no data because this date doesn't have any data in it, but now we pick one that does. And the same thing is happening here. Okay, so we have something that works. Now, the last step, or this graph over time, and I guess I shouldn't have, we got to think of a better way to name these things. This isn't percent of max jump height anymore. This is percent of maximum something, which we can, let's say, okay, let's just create another list. Let's just call this the, I don't know, label list. I don't know. And let's move this over one also. And for this label list, let's just say jump height. Let's say, no, not a good idea. Not a good idea. We'll just have a label. We'll just have a label indicator. Label indicator. And the way that we do this is we'll just say equals if C5, and we've done this a bunch of times, I want to keep it consistent. If this equals this, the first item on our list, so at the very least, everything is consistent. So if we're off, everything will be consistently off, and we can make robust changes pretty quickly. So if this is equal, if our dropdown is equal to the first thing on our list, comma, then let's say, quote, jump, jump height, comma, Alt, Enter, and I'm going to copy this, not the equal sign, and paste it down. If C5 is equal to X11, or our dropdown is equal to X11, let's say 10 meter sprint time, or maybe 10M to make it shorter, 10M sprint time, and let's Alt Enter, paste it again, X12. You'll see what I'm doing here in a second, by the way. So let's just say trap bar deadlift. We're going to use this as a label maker, essentially. So, and then if at the end of this, we'll do blank and just keep on doing parentheses until a black one comes up. I'll click OK. Now what this is doing is whatever I select here, if I select TBDL, it'll say trap bar deadlift. If I select 10M, this will say 10M sprint time. It's pretty much what we told it to say. And the reason why I want this is because now what I can do is I can say, in this cell, I can go equal, I can say percent, I think I can do it this way at least, percent of best, and no, it has to be equals quote percent of best, and I think I can pick this and this, and maybe I need to do a space there and click enter. So now what I'm telling this to say is the percent of best, whatever this is. So now if I select a date with data, we're looking at, in this case, the percent of their best 10 meter sprint time. And if I select VJ, for example, and I select a date, now we're looking at the percent of their best jump height, and that's because I select VJ. And same thing if I go to TBDL and I don't have to select a date, but if I do, percent of best trap bar deadlift. So now we have kind of like just a dynamically updating label that kind of corresponds with what we select. And the last thing that we're going to get to, and this is what reminded me of that, is we can apply that same label over here also. And we're just going to work on this graph. And then when we're done, we'll have a pretty dynamic, I guess, experience here, being able to select performances on any individual metric that are all consistently formatted and dynamic in a sense where these could be any metrics that we wanted. So let's go. Here's the area that our graph is based off of. And I know we're using max ifs here. Maybe I'll do one without max ifs too, so that you'll know how to do it if you don't have that. I'm not going to do it for all of them. But essentially, what we're doing here, what we were doing, remember, we had one metric in our data set before, it was just vertical jump. So what we said is for the latest date in our graph, is we said we want the maximum date if the athlete in our data set is equal to the athlete that we choose. So we only have one metric, so it didn't really matter. Now we have multiple metrics, and we just want to display the data for the metric that we select. Doesn't make sense to do it this way, because as you see, it's taking the date for the vertical jump, and if I were to pick a different metric, this date would be blank, and it'll be messy if we have a lot of that stuff. So we're going to do the same thing that we've done every single time so far. We're going to do an if statement to consider, or three of them, to consider each of the different potential things that we select. And the way that we're going to do this is, let's just remove this if error stuff for now. And so we'll just equals max ifs. I'll just click enter. And first thing that we're going to do is we're going to do equals if, open parenthesis, if, I'm going to do this once and I'm probably not going to do it again because we've done it so many times. If this, whatever we select in our dropdown, let's lock it in, equals the first thing in our list, which is vertical jump, and this has to stay consistent, lock in the X, lock in the 10. So if that's true, comma, we want to get the maximum date if the athlete in our data set is equal to the athlete that we pick, and also, comma, table 1, open bracket, VJ, close square bracket, and the vertical jump column, comma, is, quote, greater than 0, end quote. Now I'm just going to close this off, do another parenthesis, enter. Now it's false. Okay, well, that's not a problem. The reason being is because what we selected here, TBDL, is not equal to this right here. And if we change this to be VJ, and we go down here, now our date shows back up. That's what we want. So we have one of the criteria settled. And now we can do the rest of them. So I'm going to remove this parenthesis at the end, do a comma, and I'm going to copy this whole thing like we did before. Alt enter for me, just to separate it. Control V or paste it. So if this is not equal to X10 and it's equal to X11, our drop-down list is equal to X11, we want to get the maximum date, again, for the athlete in our data set if the 10-meter sprint, because that's the next thing on our list, the 10-meter sprint is greater than 0. I'm going to do Alt Enter, paste this again. Now, if it's equal to X12, which is our TBDL, then we want to get the maximum date if TBDL is greater than 0. And then if none of that stuff is true, I'm going to do blank or quote, quote, close it off. And that's going to be if I have an if error at the beginning, IFERROR, open parenthesis. If there's an error, and let's just do an Alt Enter here so that you can see the whole thing and it's kind of clean. So if there's an error with this stuff, then let's make everything blank. And I need to add in a couple parentheses here to make it work until the end one turns black. So notice it's red there, one more and it's black. And I'm going to click Enter. And it's still 6.6. And I have vertical jump selected. That should be the maximum date that I can select from here. And it is. Now, what if I pick something else? Let's go to 10-meter sprint. Now, what's the maximum date I can pick from here? It's 6/5/2020. Let's see if that works. I'm going to go over here. And now this date changes to 6/5. Okay, so far we have our maximum date set up well. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this formula and paste it above. And the reason why I'm going to do that is because I'm just going to do this once using the max and if. And I'm just going to do this once. I'm not going to do it for all of them. So I really hope that you can see what's done here and the difference between the two, and you can apply it to the ones back here when we do that. Okay, so I'm going to click Enter here, and now let's get started. Okay, so in this up here, I think we're just going to do one at a time. Well, we're going to do one and we're going to copy and paste it, similar to the way that we did the other one. All the components that we need are here. So I'm just going to copy and paste some stuff around. And I hope you can follow me, and I'll stay on the end of the first one for a little bit so that you can see it. So instead of max ifs, we're going to get rid of this because we don't have it. And we're going to go max if. So max, open parenthesis, if, open parenthesis. And I'm going to copy this table 1 date and remove it and put it at the end because that's how it works. It goes at the end. And I'm going to add a comma right here. Okay, and we haven't really done what we need to do yet, but hopefully you can see the order of this. So this if part stays the same, then we go to max, open parenthesis, if, open parenthesis, table 1 athlete. Instead of a comma C34, we go equals C34. And then after this parenthesis, we do if again, open parenthesis. So if table 1 athlete equals C34, comma, if table 1 VJ, and let's remove the parenthesis, remove the comma. Let's remove the parenthesis here. And if table VJ is greater than 0 without the parentheses, then we want the maximum table date. And when we click on this side of the parenthesis, yeah, we do want the value is false. So, and if that's not true, usually I thought it said, here we go. Do a couple more here. There should be 1, 2, 3. There should be 4 parentheses after this. I'm just looking closely. Oh, wait, 1, 2, 3. There should be 3 parentheses after this. And then when you click to the right of the arrow, it should say value is false. So now we're saying if none of these if statements are true, then what happens? And I'm going to copy this whole thing. Copy the whole thing. And let's remove all this stuff and paste it beneath. Now I'm going to do the same thing that I did before. So if C5 equals X11, instead of the VJ, we're going to go to the 10-meter sprint. Then I'm going to Alt-Enter, paste it again. And if C5 equals X12 for the trap bar deadlift, then I'm going to change this to the trap bar deadlift being greater than 0. TPDL greater than 0. And when I'm done with all that, we have an if error here. So if there's an error, I'm going to do blank and close a parenthesis. But it looks like we need a couple more parentheses at the end here. So I'm going to add them until the last one turns black. Now it's red. Now it's black. Now I'm going to click enter. You might have to hold down Control Shift and click enter. I don't know. I'll do Control Shift enter. And we'll know that we did that right if I have a squiggly bracket here and a squiggly bracket there. And notice it's the same date. But how do we know that it actually works? Well, let's change to a different metric with a different date. Let's go to TBDL. And TBDL, the latest date that it could be is 6-4-2020. So if we go back here, and we go to both of these dates, our max ifs at 6-4-2020, and our max if is also 6-4-2020. So both of these equations work. Take a look at this, take a screenshot, do whatever you need to do. We're going to just work with max ifs for now, but we're going to apply similar logic to these cells. And they're essentially all more or less the same, just with an extra little bit of criteria. You would just add another if statement in here. So after this if, you would add another if and add a couple more parentheses on. Okay, so far so good. So now what we're going to do is we are just going to copy this formula that we have here and paste it right here. And what we're going to add to the end of this is we need a date that is less than whatever this date is, whatever our maximum date is. So we can keep all this the same because we still want a maximum date in our data set, but it has to be the maximum date that's less than the date that we already have. So after this VJ greater than 0, we're going to go comma, also if table 1, open bracket, date, comma, is, quote, less than, quote, ampersand, whatever this is in this cell. And instead of type that out a bunch of times, I'm literally just going to, from the comma on, I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste it here, and I'm going to paste it here. And if I do that and click enter, now I have the most recent date for the whatever this, I think it's trap bar deadlift. I have the next recent date for the trap bar deadlift. I'm going to copy this, I'm going to paste it here, and I'm going to paste it here. Now I have the most recent 4 dates for the trap bar deadlift. And let's remove this because we don't need it anymore. And if I go to the trap bar deadlift, I should see in my date selector the dates that are there, or at least the most recent 4 dates that are there, and we only have 4. And if I change this to 10-meter sprint and look at these dates, I got 6-5, 5-5, 4-5, 3-5. And if I go over here, I should have 6-5, 5-5, 4-5, 3-5. All right, cool. We have dates that are appropriate for the metric that we selected. Now, kind of the last part of this, and let's go to VJ so that we see some data here, because that's what we built it on. Go to VJ, cool. Now we have data, the dates line up. Remember before when we selected VJ, we had blanks in here. Nope, the dates are working right, that's good. Now what we want to do is with this stuff, with the data, with the grades and the values that we're showing for our metrics here, we want to display the stuff that is relevant for the metric we select. And we're literally going to do the exact same thing that we just did 100 times. So I'm going to do Alt-Enter. I'm going to remove this if error for now. I like doing this just to clean this up, and then I can clean that up. And let's go equals average ifs. So the first thing is if, and I'm going to do this one time, then I'm not going to do it again. If, open parenthesis, whatever we select in our dropdown with a dollar sign and a dollar sign, it's equal to, first thing in our list, VJ, dollar sign, comma. So if that's true, then we want the average of the vertical jump grade and blah, blah, blah. We kind of already did that here. Now, if that's not true, comma, I'm going to copy this whole thing, copy the whole thing, Alt-Enter to segregate it for me, paste it, and I'm going to change X10 to X11, change the VJ grade to the NM sprint grade, and the same thing here to the 10M sprint grade. I know this is repetitive, but it's actually pretty good practice, and hopefully as you do this more, you're gaining an understanding of how this works. Other ways to do this too. And now I'm changing X11 to X12, and instead of the VJ grade, we want the TBDL grade. And here, instead of the VJ grade, we want the TBDL grade. And now I'm going to go if error, open parenthesis, Alt-Enter to get it down. If there's an error, I want it to be blank, close a parenthesis. And again, because of all these if statements, we're going to have to add more parentheses here. Keep on adding them on until it's black. So red, then black, click enter. Now, what did we do here is we did not lock the column so that if I paste this across, it'll correspond to the date that we're looking at, and that's what we want. But what I still have to do is I still have to do this for the good, the okay, and the bad areas, and we're going to do this very similar to what we did up here. We could actually, now that I think about it, more or less do the exact same thing, just point at a different date, but let's just do it here anyways. So copy this, paste it into the good, but now instead of the VGA grade, because we want the good to be colored different than the PR, instead of the VGA grade equal the U5, which is 1, we need it to be between these two numbers. So I'm going to go quote greater than or equal to, end quote, ampersand, not U5, but V, not V5, but V6, and, comma, table 1, open square bracket, VJ grade, close square bracket, comma, quote, less than or equal to, end quote, ampersand, this. So now I want the VJ grade if it's in between those two numbers. Now probably the quickest way to do this is to just copy this across the top, and we'll paste it there. And instead of VJ grade, let's change this again to the 10M sprint grade and the 10M sprint grade. This is actually pretty bad. I should have just typed it in. Instead of X10, we want to be looking at X11. And now on the last one, let's do what we did before here, where let's just type it in. So the TBDL grade, we want to be quote greater than or equal to quote ampersand, not U5, but we want it to be V6, V6, comma, and table 1, open square bracket, TBDL grade, close square bracket, comma, quote, less than equal to, end quote, ampersand, not, and we want it to be U6, so $U, $6, and I'll click enter. And now what we can do quickly is we can copy this, now that we have this framework done, here and paste it here in the okay and bad areas and change these. And let's look. So instead of U6 and V6, we want U7 and V7. Then for the bad, we want U8 and V8. So let's go to 7, and let's go to 7, and let's go to 7. Let's go to 7, and let's go to 7. And when we're all done with this, we should see only the two cells that we want to look at, and that's right. This is the OK column or row. Click OK. And notice it is between those numbers and it's showing up there. Now for bad, instead of V6, right, these are the cells it's looking at in our bad column or bad row. We want 8. So instead of V6, we want 8. And then instead of U, we want 8 and 8 and 8 and 8 and 8. And click enter. Now we have all of our stuff done here. If I highlight these 4, kind of like we did before, I copy them and I highlight all these cells here. You shouldn't see anything change, but the formulas will change. See this formula in here? That's not the one we want. We want this one pretty much. So copy all these, let's highlight all these, and let's Control V or paste it. None of the numbers change, but if I click on the formula, all the formulae change to what we want them to be. Now the last step here is we're going to copy all these formulae. I don't know if this is going to work, but let's give it a shot. I'm going to paste them all in here. And I want everything to be the same except for this word grade. Instead of the grade, I want the value. And I don't know. Let me go to my table. VJ 10M sprint. It should work. We'll see what happens. So I'm going to highlight all these. Home. I'm going to go to find, replace. And what do I want to find? I want to find the word grade with a square on the end. So grade with an open square bracket on the end. And all I want to do is I want to replace, or maybe a space grade. I want space grade with a square bracket on the end. And all I want to do is I want to replace that with a square bracket on the end. So that instead of looking at the grade columns, it's just looking at the columns that don't have grade in them. I'm going to click replace all. I don't know how this is going to go. Let's see. Yeah, that's probably not what I wanted to happen. Yeah, that's not what I wanted to happen. And that's actually, yeah, that actually doesn't make sense because I need the grade for this. So I'm going to undo that. That was a good try. Solid effort. I'll give myself a pat on the back for giving it a shot. But what we need to do is we need to change this, this, and this to not be grades because that's what we want to get the value from. But we still need these to be grades because that's what we're looking at to determine its category. Anyways, I'm going to remove the grade from here. I'm going to remove the grade from here. I'm going to remove the grade from here. I'm going to do that 2 more times, or 3 more times for the good, okay, and bad. So just remove the grade from here. Why is this still VJ grade? I must have messed something up. This should be the 10M sprint. 10M sprint. It should be TBDL. Okay, I just want to make sure that I did that. Oh man, I messed that up. I did it okay for the first one. Yeah, so your formulae should not look like this. They should look like 10M sprint grade. This should be 10M sprint grade. Sorry. And this should be 10. I was going to find it out eventually when I tested things, but 10M sprint grade. Now if we go here, yep, 10M sprint grade. Go here, 10M sprint grade. And now let's change this to 10M sprint. And we'll change this to VJ. Because remember, we're getting rid of the grades on this first area to display values. And let's get rid of the grades here. Grade. And I noticed that, by the way, it's a percentage, and that's okay for now. 10M sprint change this instead of the grade to be VJ. Okay, so let's just go over this really quickly, what we're saying. We want to say, or what we're saying is if C5 in our dropdown is equal to X10, which is VJ, what we select in our dropdown, then we want to get the average, or we want to get the average vertical jump value when the athlete is the athlete that we select, the date is this date, right here in green, and the vertical jump grade, or the VJ grade, is greater than or equal to V8, which is right here, and less than or equal to U8, which is right here. That's what we're saying. And if that's not true, then we go through our other steps. But that's what we're saying here for our bad area. And for the okay one, we're looking at these two values. For our good one, we're looking at these two values. And for our personal best, we're looking at this one. I'm going to click enter. And before I move this on, let's format this to be num, make them numbers, 2 decimals, copy that, and let's paste this across here. Now, what we should see is that the PR as a percentage should align with the PR as a value, and the categories should align with values in the same category. So OK, 25.6 is 88%. OK, 24.7, 84.9%. Another OK for this person, 24, 82.5%. But we'll notice all these OK values are between these two numbers, or between 80 and 89.9%, and they are, and it's all working fine. And these values correspond with the values here. But now, let's see what happens if we change the metric. So let's go to 10-meter sprint, and let's pick a date just for this graph here, 5-5. It doesn't really matter. But if we go to our 10-meter sprint now, what's interesting is we have PR, good, and 1.88. And what's happening here is interesting to me. I don't really know what's going on. Let's just check what's being selected here. Oh, I messed something up. B7, U7. Oh, yeah, okay. So what I need to do now, because we made corrections here, is I need to copy all this and paste it across again, because remember, I mistakenly had, let's just go over what I did wrong for a second. So what I mistakenly had before I made corrections in this column is I forgot to change this to 10M sprint grade. It was still VJ grade, and when C5 is equal to X11, which is this, is equal to this, X11, we want the sprint grade, not the VJ grade. And I made that correction in this first column here. See how it says sprint grade here, but when I go here, it says VJ grade. I need to copy what I did here and paste them across here. And now when I do that, now everything should align up for the sprints, which they weren't before. And now when I go to my graph, we should get the values and everything should align accordingly. I'm sorry about that. Made a mistake and now it's fixed, I hope. And now let's change the title of this. And remember, we made a thing, we made a label here. So what we're saying right now is equals C34 equals the name and apostrophe S, so that person's jump height over time. But instead of that, let's do equals and, quote, apostrophe S, space, end quote, and now let's go up here and let's select this. So we want that and, quote, space, over time, end quote. Now what we're saying is we want this person, whoever that is, apostrophe S there, and whatever our label is. So we want there, right now it will say 10-meter sprint time. and a space, then over time. So if I click enter, Sierra's 10-meter sprint time over time, which kind of sounds weird, but if I select a different name, the data will change as it should, and it'll change that person's name, whatever this is over time. And if I change the metric to, let's just say TBDL, I don't have to change the date here, but I will for this graph. I say that person's trap bar deadlift over time. And similarly, the values will display what they should, and they should be in the categories that they should be in, and the color should correspond with the percentage of the maximum or percentage best. And we can change the name, and it all should kind of correspond the way that we want it to. And that's all I got. So I hope this video is helpful, and now you should be able to display any metric that you're collecting and get a percentage grade for whoever the player is. And yeah, I mean, it's pretty cool, I think. So let me know your thoughts. I know it's a little bit more complicated and a little bit more repetitive than some of the other videos, but hopefully it serves you well, and and you can play around with it and get some good value out of it. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. All right, I know I already ended the video and stuff, but I tricked you. There's one other thing that I want to do. You can follow along or not. I thought it would be cool that when I select what I want to see, since we have a couple metrics to choose from, that there's an image associated with each. So what I've done here is there's a column B, that has the name of each of the variables that we have to select from in our data set. So we have TBDL, VJ, and 10M, which are all the things in our drop-down list. And you can have a bunch of things in here if you wanted to. Make sure that you set them up at the beginning so you don't have to keep on going through these formulae and adding new things. But in any case, we have one column with those, and they have to line up exactly with what is in the drop-down menu. Then we have one column with images. And notice each image is inside the cell. It's just an image, and you can move it anywhere, but it's placed inside the cell. And the first thing that we're going to do to get these images over there is I'm going to copy the cell, not the image. This is the image, copy the cell. And then in this sheet, I'm going to right-click, and I'm going to go to Paste Special, and I'm going to paste a linked picture. When I've done that, we have a picture in here, and that's pretty cool. But if I change this to 10M, for example, the picture doesn't change. So now we need to work on doing that. And the way that we can do that is we can create a formula, and I'm going to go in any cell. It doesn't really matter. I'm doing it here. I'm going to equals index. Now, what do I want? I want in sheet 1 this. I want to get something in here, which is one of these pictures. I'm going to put a $sign before the first C and the second C, comma. All right, so we want one of these pictures, but then we need to match it to something. MATCH, open parenthesis. What are we matching it to? Well, we're going to match whatever's in this cell, which is what we pick in our dropdown. I'm going to put a $sign before the C and a $sign before the 5, comma, with. So what are we matching this with? Get the picture? Well, we're matching this with whatever is in here that's next to the picture. So I'm going to click on B, and I'm going to put a $sign before the first B and a $sign before the second B, and then do comma. Now it's match type 0, and I'm going to do 2 parentheses and click enter. And I get a value of 0. It doesn't matter what the value is, but this shows us that the formula is working. So if I remove 1 parenthesis and I click enter, the formula won't work. So it's important to do this step first, even though we're not going to use this formula in this way, to make sure that it works. And this one does. So now we're going to go to the name manager, which is in here. So in the formulas area, name manager, and I'm going to click on that. Or well, wait. All right, before we do this, we're going to highlight this. Highlight our formula that we have here and copy it. I did Control C, I copied it. I'm going to click Escape. Now we're going to go into that name manager, And we're going to see that we have something in there, and that's our table. If you have multiple tables in here, you'll see multiple tables listed and any other named ranges that you create. And now I'm going to create a new one. I don't know, let's call this, let's call it image, because what this is we're looking for images. And in this refers to area, we're going to remove what's in there, and we're going to paste what our formula is. So it's the same formula that I typed in up here. They're exactly the same. Click OK. And you'll see the formula again come down here. And you'll also see that once you've done that, that you have a new named range here. And I'm going to click Close now. And we don't need this formula anymore. I'm going to delete it. But when I click on this cell or the linked picture, it's looking at sheet 1, C2. And if I go here, well, that's right, because that's the picture that I told it to look at. We're going to change this formula up here to look at IMAG. Oh, and there's my thing from the name manager. Click on that and click enter. And nothing will happen because we're on vertical jump, or VJ, which is what is aligned with that picture. And in a second I'll change it, but first notice that there's this gray box around the image. I don't want that. And the way that I get rid of it is I go to my area where my pictures are housed. I can go to view, and there's going to be something that says grid lines checked somewhere, and I want to uncheck that. That'll remove the grid lines from this sheet, and that's what's causing that gray box around the picture. So I'm going to come back here and notice the gray box goes away. And now if we want to, we can format these images in any way that we want. They don't have to be black. If you use one that comes with Excel, particularly, in the way that you go do that is you go to Insert, Illustrations, Icons. You can add icons from Excel. You can color them any way that you want. These are not from Excel, so I don't have that luxury, but I still can change the color. Like maybe I want them all to be gold, so I can go here, click on the image, make the color gold. It does let you do a couple of different things. This one is from Excel, so I can color it a little bit differently, but I'm just going to make it gold too. I guess it's a little bit darker gold. Maybe I do the more fill colors and try to make it more similar to what the other ones are. Too bright. Too bright. That's better. They're kind of similar. Okay, so now this icon will change to be that color. Maybe I just change this dashboard around a little bit. Oops. To make it different than the other ones. I actually don't really like that gold color, but it's fine. Just changing some things around, like I always do. Just change them around. All right, so I'm going to change this now to something else. Let's go to 10M. And now this guy changes to whatever the 10M guy is in this sheet. And if I do something else, let's say TBDL, then he's going to change to whatever that image was for TBDL in that sheet. And I'm going to copy this linked picture, and I'm going to paste it down here too. So I want two of them. I want one by the graph and one by the top. So no matter where I'm looking, I kind of have a quick glance, or I know what I'm looking at. And yeah, so there we go. We have a linked picture, and we have a nice working graph. And I'll probably change the colors of this stuff. I don't like the way that it looks, but there you got it. So I hope you had fun in this video. Let me know if you had any questions. Thank you.